Hey, this video is for Mr. Eidner's Biology 2 class for Wednesday, December 9th. We're going to talk about the two remaining groups of um, plants. We already talked about the non-vascular plants. We talked about the seedless vascular plants. So remember, the non-vascular plants were the mosses and their relatives, and the seedless vascular plants were the ferns and their relatives. Okay, so let's get started. Um, so gymnosperms are vascular plants, just like the seedless vascular plants, but the only difference is they produce seeds. And so they're going to produce seeds that are not going to be developing inside of a fruit. They're just going to be exposed. Sometimes they're exposed on a cone. Um, Sometimes they're exposed just by themselves. You'll see that with the ginkgo biloba tree, but they're not within a fruit. Gymno is a prefix that means naked, okay? And so that's kind of where these guys get their name from. Gymnosperms do produce pollen instead of sperm, so that's a huge kind of evolutionary advantage or adaptation coming from the um, ferns. Um, and so the pollen can travel and fertilize the egg without relying on water to swim through. So pollen is nothing more than plant sperm that no longer swims like sperm. It's the male gamete. So examples of gymnosperms include the conifers. Those are the cone-bearing plants. Your Christmas tree at home is a conifer. It's a cone-bearing plant. A pine tree growing in your backyard is a conifer. These are just subdivisions of gymnosperms. Cycads, and this one's pronounced needophyte. So these are all different types of gymnosperms. So let's start with conifers first. And really, when we think of gymnosperms, this is the most popular group of gymnosperms. If we look at the picture off to the right, it's showing you let me just move myself here. It's showing you an eastern hemlock tree. That happens to be our state tree of Pennsylvania. And it was very valuable. In fact, the bark used to be stripped from this tree, soaked in water, and an acid called tannic acid would seep out of the bark into the water. And in the olden days, you used to be able to take an animal hide, either from a cow or a pig, and soak it in that tannic acid water. And the acids would change the hide into leather. And so we even have a town around here named after tanning hides and creating leather, and it's called Tannersville. And so this was a very important tree back in the day, and it's our state tree. White pine trees, amongst other pine trees, are very common around here, and they are also types of gymnosperms that we call conifers. They are cone-bearing plants. They have cones that produce pollen and eggs. So there are male cones that produce pollen, and then there are female cones that produce eggs. A lot of people refer to the female cones as seed cones. So this picture of a white pine cone, this is actually a female cone. It's a seed cone. The pollen cones kind of are a lot smaller, and they have a goldish appearance to them because they are covered in pollen. This is the type of pollen that gets all over your windshield, all over your porch at home when they start releasing their pollen. Cycads. So cycads fit into a phylum called Cycadophyta, and there are male and female plants. So this would be a male cycad. This would be a female cycad, and they produce different cones for making the pollen and eggs. So obviously these cones here in the middle of this cycad would produce eggs, and then these cones in the middle of this male plant would produce the pollen. Cycads are indigenous to Mediterranean climates, kind of like southern Italy, Sicily, Greece, areas of the world like that. Ginkgos. So ginkgos fit into a phylum called Ginkgophyta, and there's actually only one living species of ginkgo, and it's the ginkgo biloba tree. And they don't produce cones, they just produce their seeds, not located in a fruit or anything. So this is a seed here, this is a seed here, this is another one. And a unique feature of these ginkgo biloba trees is they are very, very pollution tolerant. So a lot of times in urban settings, people try to add more green, they try to add more trees to kind of give people that mental aspect of being out in nature in their life, even if they're from an urban environment. So they're very pollution tolerant. Also, another unique feature of them is when their seeds fall to the ground, they smell like vomit. Okay, so kind of like a nice, not a nice smell. It's a unique feature. We have ginkgo trees up and down a lot of our major cities like Philadelphia or New York, and I think there's even some ginkgo trees on Main Street. Okay, so that brings us to our fourth and final group of plants, and these are the angiosperms. So the prefix angio means vessel or container. And so these guys, along with having a vascular system, along with producing seeds, they produce fruits that enclose their seeds. And so you have to think about the whole purpose of a fruit is to attract an animal to eat the fruit. And when the animal ingests that fruit, it also ingests the seeds, and the seeds are then excreted out miles down the road or miles down the pasture or wherever. And they now have been dispersed from the original parent plant. If a plant were to just drop all of its seeds at the base of itself, its offspring would be competing for water and other resources. So fruits are really important in helping plants to disperse or spread their seeds around. Angiosperms also produce flowers. This is another major adaptation. So the whole purpose behind a flower is to attract a pollinator, such as a bee or a hummingbird or a bat or even monkeys in some case, to come and grab the pollen in return for, in exchange for, maybe a sweet nectar meal or even for some of the pollen itself. That insect or animal takes the pollen from one plant and brings it to another plant, and that pollen can fertilize an egg. So angiosperms, the main thing with angiosperms, they produce fruits that have seeds, and those are for fruit or seed dispersal. And they also produce flowers meant to attract animals to help with pollination and that part of sexual reproduction. Flowers produce bright colors and strong scents and nectar meals to attract pollinators to do their dirty work. There are two major groups of angiosperms. All right. One of these is called a monocot group. So the monocots, let me just move myself here. So monocots have only one seed leaf, or what we want to call cotyledon. All right, I'm going to show you a picture I believe on the next slide of what a cotyledon is. But the little baby embryonic plant inside of a seed, if it only has one leaf, it is considered to be a monocot. Mono means one. There are some other things that go along with being a monocot. You have flower parts in multiples of 3. So this particular flower has 3 petals. All right. You also have parallel veins in your leaves. So this leaf goes with this monocot right here. You can see the parallel veins. Grass growing in your front yard, it has parallel veins. It's a type of monocot angiosperm. Dicots are angiosperms that produce seeds that have 2 seed leaves inside of them. I'll show you a picture, or 2 cotyledons is the proper name. And they have flower parts in multiples of 2, but usually 4 or 5. So you can see this dicot flower has 5 petals. All right. And they produce leaves that are branching, that have branching veins. So you can see the difference between the branching veins here and then the parallel veins. So definitely different groups of angiosperms. So when we look at this, when we look at this flower over here, it's a lily. Is it a monocot or dicot? So think about it. Monocot or dicot? If we base that off of what the leaves look like, the number of flower parts, it looks like there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 petals. The veins are parallel. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of these parts in here. So it seems like, if we go back to the previous slide, it seems like because the flower, or because this plant has parallel veins and its flower parts are in multiples of 3, that it is definitely a monocot, and it is a monocot. If we look at another example here, this is from an apple tree. You can see the leaves are the dead giveaway, branching veins, flower parts. Let's see, there's 5. All right, and we're not going to count all these flower parts, but branching veins, flower parts, there's 5 of them. If we go back to that slide, we see the branching veins, we see flower parts, 4s or 5s. So this one here would definitely be a dicot plant, okay? So we're going to stop there with our discussion on gymnosperms and angiosperms, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Thank you.